You are responsible for driving productivity and profitability in your organization. The key to doing that is operations management and having processes in place to help you to achieve that. Underlying successful processes in the best construction companies is the best technology, and integrating those technologies to help you achieve that profitability is essential. That's what this discussion is about today on Construction Genius. My guest is Don Kafka. Don is the CEO and founder of ToolWatch. He established the Denver-based company in 1991 to provide tool and equipment systems that track and manage resources throughout an organization. Don has been in the construction industry for over 50 years. He has run his own business, and he started ToolWatch to solve one of his own problems in his electrical contracting business. So the good news is, you know that Don knows what he's talking about. So enjoy this conversation with Don. We're going to talk about why right implementation of technology is so important in your organization and how you as a leader can drive that through communicating the value and the benefits of technology to folks in the field and in the office. So I appreciate Don joining me. Enjoy the conversation here today, and thank you for listening to Construction Genius. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Don, welcome to Construction Genius.
Well, thank you, Eric. Thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. The reason I wanted to have you on the show is because you have over 50 years of experience in the construction industry, and you've operated and run your own electrical contracting company. In that time, what was the biggest challenge that you faced running your business?
I'd say the biggest challenge was productivity in the field. And it wasn't because the people in the field didn't want to work or didn't know what they were doing. By and large, most people really want to do a good job. But I found out early on, as I was growing the company, that we weren't doing a good enough job operationally. We had people on the job site that didn't have the right tools or equipment, they didn't have the right materials, or they didn't have the right information. And that was it in a nutshell. Once we started figuring out how to get the right information, tools, and materials to them, they do a pretty darn good job, and productivity improved.
What are some of the typical bottlenecks in terms of those things, tools, equipment, materials, information? What are some of the typical bottlenecks that you've seen in construction businesses through your own experience and through observing others?
Yeah. Well, the bottlenecks typically are on the operational side of a company, at least for the tools and materials. On the information side, a lot of that's been addressed over the years with connectivity and application to move information around about design and change orders and all of that. So we focus on the operational side of a company. And when I say operational, we're talking about the warehouse and yard, primarily being able to get the right tools, the right equipment out to a project on time and get the right materials out there.
And so why do they struggle? Why does the warehouse and the yard, let's say everyone's got good intentions, right? The guys in the field, they want to ball out and build. The guys in the warehouse and in the yard, they want to do their job too. Why does that disconnect happen?
I would say it lands squarely in leadership. The leadership in the organization doesn't understand the value of strong internal operations, and they don't get behind it. They're destined to failure.
Okay.
The people in the warehouse will want to do a good job, but they'll be pulling their hair out trying to answer all the calls and get everything where it needs to be and reorder and manage the whole supply chain. But without leadership involvement, that means they probably don't have dedicated processes that are designed on best practices. They probably don't have any technologies to support to enable that. They're left with using a spreadsheet or email. So yeah, leadership is number one.
Okay. So addressing the leaders then who are listening to this podcast, and I know there's many of them in senior roles and they own their own companies, all these kinds of things. Where would you encourage them to begin in order to strengthen their internal operations?
One, getting behind this initiative and being a champion for it in their organization, and then start dialing in the processes. In other words, understanding what the workflow looks like, understand it from, let's say a typical workflow would be the field is requesting particular tools or certain materials, et cetera. How does that order come into the organization? Who manages that? How do they fulfill that order? How do they turn that around and get that back out? Companies that don't have good operations, we've seen them take more than a week, sometimes 2 weeks to turn around a simple order for items. And you can imagine what that's doing to their productivity in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. So then leadership has to take complete responsibility for it. The first thing I'm hearing just in my mind pushback is, yeah, I know I've got a problem over here, but I'm so busy, and they know they have issues, but they just don't set the time aside. So in your experience working with construction companies, how do the best construction companies really go through this process of dialing in their workflows and understanding the way things are running in their business?
First, they come to the realization that this is a critical part of their success. In other words, if they're going to be profitable on these projects, they have to dial these internal operations in. Once they understand that, and that's the biggest hurdle, but once they understand that, they start making an effort to understand the process and start documenting the steps, start training that, teaching that, and then they start looking around usually for technology to support that effort.
Okay. How can they convince themselves, so to speak, about the importance of dialing in their operations? What have you seen? How have those lights come on in people's heads? Can you give me an example of that with a contractor where the light came on, they said, oh yeah, I see where now I need to make an improvement?
Sure. I think they really only need to interview the people in the field with an open mind. And we've seen, the culture change dramatically when systems are in place to support all this, where suddenly the field and the warehouse are collaborating instead of playing tug of war. But yeah, I think another thing they might do is they might look at manufacturing. There have been some studies out there. McKinsey did one a few years ago that's really interesting. It shows the productivity in manufacturing dramatically increasing over the last 10 to 20 years, and productivity in construction actually deteriorating, going down.
Right.
And if you think about construction, in a sense, it's like manufacturing. You're building something, but in a facility, in a manufacturing plant, it's much easier to build the workflow and the processes in there. But manufacturing has embraced, let's say for the last 50 years now, this concept of operations management.
Yeah.
They couldn't manufacture great cars and get them off the assembly line if every day they were inventing some new process, or people were inventing their own way to do things. It has to be structured, and it has to be dialed in, and it has to be supported.
And so what you've talked about is they have to understand the importance. They then have to understand their processes, document them, and then they need to implement tools to help them to execute those processes successfully. And that's where your company ToolWatch comes in terms of one aspect of that. So tell me specifically what it is that you do to help construction companies with this whole operations management piece.
Okay. Well, to frame this up a little bit, let me give you a little bit of the history. When I started the company in 1991, I started it because I couldn't find a company or a commercial product out there to help me manage our tools and equipment. And
this is when you had an electrical contracting business.
Exactly. Had a contracting business. And I really didn't understand operations management. I just knew that we were failing to get the productivity in the field because we weren't performing well enough internally. So I thought what we needed was tool tracking. And then I learned over the years what we really needed was more of a tool management situation where we really knew where everything was and we were managing utilization, et cetera. And then as the ToolWatch company, as more sophisticated customers came on board, they started telling us that, Don, you're missing the point here. We're managing our operations. This isn't just about tracking tools. This is about streamlining our operations. So consequently, they pushed hard, the industry pushed hard for a lot of different modules in our product that would give them the ability to do that. For instance, they wanted pick tickets so they could have them on mobile devices and pick the items. They wanted digital requisitions coming in from the field, so those requisitions would land in a digital way in the inside. So all of these changes over the years cause us to realize the business that we're really in is the operations management business. So what we do is we give them all the tools, so to speak. Maybe that's not a great metaphor for this conversation, but we give them all the tools to dial in these processes and make them consistent and support the workflow.
So the software tools, you're saying?
Yeah, the software tools, exactly.
So let's explore that a little bit. What I'm interested in is you get this sort of, I have this picture in my mind of all these balls bouncing technology-wise around a construction company. You know, they have a piece of software to do their estimating. They have another piece of software to do their planning. There seems to be a lot of challenges in construction companies, integrating them all, successfully implementing them, actually getting ROI from the use of technology. So in your experience, what is the most effective way that you've seen construction companies implement tools like the ones that you offer and other types of software tools? What recommendations do you have there?
Yeah, it simply has to be integrated in with the rest of the software in your organization. Not certainly not all of it, but your critical software. For instance, an ERP system or an accounting system. Our system integrates with those. That's essential. Matter of fact, nowadays with the convergence of connectivity and API integration, cloud, it's very easy, really. And I hate to minimize it, but it's very easy to integrate from one cloud application to another and pass data back and forth. So That's the first thing, that it does have to be integrated. Nobody wants to have data keyed into multiple systems or have latency. It went into the accounting system at the beginning of the week, but they haven't had time to get it into their tool management system.
Yeah.
Now it has to be instantaneous. Everybody has mobile devices. They want to see it within seconds on their device. So
when you're implementing, let's say your software specifically, where you're tracking small tools, a great part of what you do is tracking those small tools. Is that right? Or small to medium-sized tools? What kind of pushback do you get in an organization that would cause the implementation to not be as effective? And how do you overcome some of those roadblocks?
Well, almost all those roadblocks, and I could list a few of them here, almost all of them are solved with leadership participation.
What are some of them? So let's talk about what are some of the ones the roadblocks that you see?
So sometimes the field will not want to be involved, let's say, in this solution because they don't understand the benefit to them. Or somebody has tried this in the past and said, oh, well, you're going to start tracking and managing tools, but we want you to do it. Well, they've got their hands full building the project. So there's pushback there. Then you'll go into a warehouse and they've been doing it this way for years on paper or on a whiteboard, and they don't feel like they want to use new technology. It isn't until you help each of these groups really understand the value and the benefits to them that this really takes on its own life in an organization.
Okay, so that's really interesting there, because there's three things there. The field doesn't want to get involved because they don't understand the technology, or they've tried technology before and it hasn't worked, or we have a particular way of doing things that we've done it for years and we don't want to change. And that's where the leadership steps in. So in your experience, how are the effective leaders in construction companies? How do they roll out these technology initiatives? What steps do they take in order to be effective?
Well, the first is, one, they have to understand it and get behind it, obviously. But more and more companies now are being led by leadership that is educated about business and processes. So they're welcoming and embracing the technology. So that's number one. Then they will collaborate with an organization like ours. They'll put a team together in their organization that is responsible for bringing this in and implementing it throughout their organization. And if it's done properly, a system like this is touching their accounting, it's touching their warehouse, their yard, their safety, their field. It really touches a lot of parts of the organization. So that is a fairly large effort. But with leadership behind it and a team tackling it, they start biting it off, and we help them through that process.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Can you give me an idea, typically like a range of the size of contractor you're working with? Do you have a range?
We do. We work from the smallest growing contractors, with only maybe 10 or 20 people in the field, on up to large contractors that are worldwide and they're billion plus.
Okay, so you've got a wide range. Let's just say in a typical implementation of a system like yours, how often is the leadership team that's responsible for the implementation, how often are they meeting together to make sure the implementation is going through? And who is in that implementation team to make sure that it's effective?
Right. That depends largely on the size of the organization. So if you're working with some of the largest organizations in the world, leadership will embrace this, but they're not typically part of that team.
Right.
Middle level management is on that team.
Yep.
And we work with them and collaborate with them with an online project management system where their team logs in, we log in, we're with them every week, looking at their progress, talking about the next steps. And if it's a large organization, they may have 10 or 15 people on that team, different disciplines, of course. Some might be, IT, some might be financial, et cetera.
Yep.
But our implementation team will work with them each week, look at their progress, keep helping them move down that path to finally going live with the system and achieving their outcome, their desired outcome.
So it's essential then that they're committed to the process, and it sounds like there needs to be regular weekly communication in order to be able to get this implementation going effectively.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's fairly easy to accomplish now. As a matter of fact, it is so much easier now doing it virtually, and we've been doing it virtually for several years. But it's so much more effective instead of landing in their warehouse or in their conference room with a team of people and trying to accomplish this in a week or two. That's just not successful.
Yes, that's excellent. Okay, so let's say someone has tried this before and they've failed. They've tried an implementation of a piece of technology, whether it's the ToolWatch technology or another piece of technology. There's been a failure. What does a leader need to do in order to clear the ground for a fresh start in terms of technology implementation or integration?
Yeah, I think the most important thing they can do is champion it, set the stage, explain to everybody, yes, we've tried this before, but now we're going to embrace this at a different level. We're going to put the resources behind it that are needed, whether that's technology or software or people or dollars. But this is going to become an integral part of our behavior and how we operate as a business. Once everybody understands that, it's amazing how much smoother the whole process goes.
It's so interesting to me how critical the leadership piece is, because I can see some leaders, they might just have this tendency to want to throw a piece of a software at a problem and hope for the best. But that doesn't seem to be the most effective way to get this stuff done.
No, that's a recipe for failure when the CEO says, we're going to do this and I want you to go ahead and get this done. And then they're not involved any longer. They didn't really sell anybody on their commitment to make this successful. Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. We'd rather not go down that path with the company. We would much rather have leadership involved. Now, we might meet with them infrequently because they'll want to know how the project's going.
Yep.
But they're typically meeting with their internal implementation team if they're serious about this.
Yep.
And they have to be serious about it to devote the resources, the people, and the time to make this successful. We have not yet seen a company that had leadership involvement, that devoted the resources to it. We have not seen a company fail. If it's implemented correctly and the leadership team is behind it, it's a success in the organization.
Let me ask you this. At what point in your experience in a construction company's growth, and I'm thinking in terms of revenue or size, whatever the case is, at what point should a company be dedicating a person to this whole question of what technologies should be coming into the company and how we should be integrating them? Can you give me something on that?
Yeah, I think it's a fairly small company. My own personal experience in the electrical contracting business was when we hit about 30 people out in the field, the wheels started coming off. Now, we didn't have maybe the resources or all the knowledge, to pull all of that off at that point. But certainly that's when you need to start thinking about it and start embracing a process.
That's really excellent, Don. We've had this discussion about how a company can achieve operational excellence. Just give me a summary here of the top 3 things a company needs to focus on in order to improve their productivity and their profitability.
At the risk of beating up leadership too much, one, leadership's got to get on board. That's number one. They need to understand that their productivity is dependent on how well they operate internally. Matter of fact, I love what Warren Buffett says, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but he says something to the effect that focus on the process, not the result.
Yeah.
So, I think that's critical. So once leadership buys into it, the next thing is to understand the business processes and build good, consistent business processes based on best practices in the industry. That's critical. And then the next critical component is these technology support, so to speak. You need systems to support these processes so that they're consistent and they're accurate and they're fast. Because you can build business processes that will do everything you need, but if they're so burdensome, now you're just slowing down the entire organization. So you can't have that. You've got to have good, fast throughput, and you have to have accuracy.
Excellent.
That's where the technology comes in.
Excellent. So speaking of technology, your company, ToolWatch Corp, how can people get in touch with you? What sort of people should be getting in touch with you?
ToolWatch.com. We're on the web, of course. That's one way. If they like, they can also reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to, I'm gonna say, like-minded people that are interested in improving their productivity through operations. D. Kafka at toolwatch.com. Go ahead and reach out to me. I'd enjoy the conversation.
Excellent. I very much appreciate your time here. Toolwatch.com is the place to get you there. Quick question though. You're in Denver, but you're also in Florida. If I was in Florida, where would be a great place for me to eat?
Ooh, Florida. Gee, does it have to be Florida? I've got some other good ones, but
okay, let's go back. Where would you recommend?
Oh, one of my favorites is in just outside of Washington, D.C. It's a little restaurant called Volt, V-O-L-T, and I have a great chef. His last name is Voltaggio. That's a real experience. I love that place. Volt.
And tell us where that is again?
It's outside of Washington, D.C., but I've forgotten the name of the town.
Okay, B-O-L-T?
V as in Victor.
Volt.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Let me see. So if you're in DC, Volt Restaurant, I just pulled it up here. We're going to put that into the show notes.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, Don, I really, really appreciate your time, and we'll make sure that we have all the links to the company in the show notes. And just want to encourage the leadership in organizations. Let's go out there and get our operations in order and do whatever is necessary to drive that productivity and profitability.
Well, thank you, Eric. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Have a great day. Today's episode was brought to you by the Construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private, invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.